Hello again, and welcome to episode 3 of the Valuers Corner. Today we have Jason Akermanis, an ex-Brisbane Lions star. Jason, why AFL?
Aussie rules, yeah. Aussie rules is it's interesting because you generally get brought up in a state. Like I was lucky enough to be born in Mildura. My mum was down there, had me and my brother. And then when I was quite young, maybe 8, I think in 86 we came back and we moved around the corner from the biggest club at that stage, Maine. And Maine was a great club to go to. Very strong, always had grand finals, very strong teams, strong culture. And so I was quite small, so playing Aussie rules is easier because of my speed and my skill, but also my endurance. And playing rugby league, rugby union, I mean, those games were, to me, one, they had bigger bodies to go up against, but they were quite boring.
Yeah, that sounds it. Well, who had the biggest influence in your career?
I think, my mum encouraged me to play, but I think when I was about 14, she encouraged me to not play or look to play professionally. She wanted me to work, and I wasn't really with ADHD. I don't think working was really necessarily the right path for me, because back then you could get in the AFL, you could go through the system. The Bears were coming along at that stage, and so for me to progress through the ranks, I was in state teams under 12s, 14s, 16s, and 17s. And when I was 16, I was in the under 17s. Second year I got in there, and the Lions and the Bears, as it was back then, they said, look, can you come to the pre-season? Did the pre-season. The following year I was All-Australian. So they were able to pick me up and have me as a local selection. So in the end, like living here, and I was just about to go into year 12 at Nudgee College. By then I'd left Wavell. I'd got a scholarship for athletics, for running 400 metres, and I was very good at that. So, you go to a rugby league school like Wavell, which is a very strong rugby league, and then you go to one of the powerhouses. I think they still hold the record for the most Wallaby players of any school that's ever come through. So Nudgee was very strong. They hated me. They didn't really want to talk to me. No one even knew. I think in year 12, round 4, I had my first game, and I was on the back page of the paper, and only two of my classmates knew because they're Aussie rulers. But you had this very strong culture. So in the end, for me to actually get through, and back then, I mean, it still took till 99. So you're talking 4 years later. I was 22 before you really became professional. So I was in that first generation where you did actually do it for a whole living. And it happens now all the time. But back then, you still worked. Training was at 3, 4, 5 after work. There was only one player on the whole list when I started, Roger Merritt, who was a full-time pro. Everyone else worked. That's the way it was.
That's insane. Well, anyways, cheers to that.
Yes.
Talking about mums and being a big influence in our careers. My mum didn't want me to play any form of physical sport.
But to get back to you, to answer the question, my biggest influence is probably, besides my coaches, was Phil Jauncey, Dr. Phil Jauncey. He was there when I started, but in Lee's era, he was very much involved. So Dr. Phil Jauncey, like the psychology of him probably took me from a good player to a great player, because he helped me work out myself and then my teammates and working with them and the coaching staff, and then that really took off. So all the physical side, you got great coaches and all that, but without that mental side, without Phil Jauncey, I don't think he's still a great mate of mine. He's in I think he's 74 now, and I still talk to him regularly. Like, he's just a genius.
Yeah. So your mental state obviously plays a very big role, whether it's AFL, real estate, all that sort of jazz. Even with us in the valuation world, I've got to go through certain things in the morning before I can be prepared for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And if we went back to those AFL days, did you have a pre-game ritual?
Well, yeah, I did. I always did. I mean, humans are pretty much creatures of habit, but I would generally eat the same meal, which I worked out later wasn't that good for me. But I had this fettuccine and creamy chicken, which was great. The fettuccine was no good. But if I look back, and then I'd sort of, depending if it was a night game, I'd go down where I lived. There was a park. I'd kick with my brother, probably about 11 o'clock, go home, have my meal, go to sleep, get up, and then I'd go to the game we'd start about 7:10, so I'd usually be on the road to the game about 5:30, and that was always regular. Day games, away games, pretty much the same. You have your treatment, you always get that ticked off. I generally didn't have treatment on the day of, but the night before. And they were all my good mates as well, the physios and doctors. So I'd always hang out with them. They're good value, and my teammates. And so food was the same. Get up, generally just have, even on day games, I'd get up and have a snooze about 10 and then go to the game, and we'd play at like 2 most days. I mean, sometimes 1. But, yeah, it was very consistent. And I always liked, there was a teammate of mine who was such a thinker. He would leave at like 5:29. And he would always drive. And one day he let his wife, who's in Mozzie, she would buzz around. She was all over the shop. And he was so infuriated. He played so terribly that he couldn't ever stand having her drive to the game. So he would always drive. Like things like that, I think my mum drove me once, and then I think my wife drove me once, and that never happened again because they're terrible drivers. So I would drive, and because, I'd be trying to do the quickest way. And it wouldn't matter. It was like the footy field. If you could get in front of someone to save yourself one car, you'd do it. And people, and of course my wife and all that just take their time in the slow lane. I'm like, God. So that was always consistently what I do.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. But I guess, probably something everyone would like to know is why the handstand? Where did that come about?
Yeah, the handstand started in '99. I was watching a game, Ronnie Burns from Geelong. I tell this story all the time when I go and speak to clubs and pretty much corporately. But anyway, I was there, and Ronnie and I had played together in the Allies back when we had State of Origin against Victoria. So I'm watching this game. Ronnie's playing in Geelong, kicks a goal late in the game. He's feeling very happy with himself. He's running around the Gary Ablett scene, and, you go and get your good drugs. And he runs past there and he does a cartwheel. And I'm thinking, what an idiot.
Yeah.
The next week, Ronnie and I, so that year I went from a forward to a back. And so Lee Matthews had blonde hair by that year. Lee goes, mate, I want you to play on all the quickest players. So I'd nearly always playing on very fast Indigenous players, which was great. But they hated me because I was quicker than them. Plus I could run all day. So anyway, I see Ronnie. I get about 30 minutes from Ronnie, and Ronnie's like, hey, brother. And I'm like, Ronnie. And he goes, mate, we got a problem. I said, what's that, Ronnie? He said, mate, I'm going to keep my spot in my team, but at the end of the day, I don't think you'll keep yours. So Ronnie's saying he's going to whoop me. I said, no worries, Ronnie. So anyway, after the game, I'd actually had 30 touches and kicked 3 goals from the back pocket. I think I went up the midfield late in the third quarter. Anyway, towed Ronnie up. And I said, see ya. After the game, I was like, thanks, Ronnie. He goes, you deadly, bros, piss off. Anyway, I go down and thank the crowd, and a teammate of mine who was always on my case and always giving me a lot of grief, Justin Lepage, goes, why don't you do a cartwheel? So I went down and did a cartwheel. The next week, I remember we played at home, 1 p.m. game. It was hot. After the game, 3 Brownlow votes, and I'm bloody sweating like a gypsy with a mortgage. I'm thanking the crowd because, we had to back then because we weren't sure they'd come back. And I go down to thank the Western end there, and Leopard goes, do one of those cartwheel things. And I was so fatigued, I didn't even do a cartwheel. I did a stupid handstand. And my teammates were embarrassed and my family were embarrassed. But from that moment on, the handstand, and then eventually the handstand became a push-up handstand. And so it kind of evolved. There wasn't always a handstand. It was certainly started as a cartwheel, but it was ridiculous. But I tell you, I sold more hot dogs and pies and Pepsis and Cokes because they would all stay and they'd all watch. And then if I didn't go to certain areas of the crowd, because there's usually 4 points that you go to, goals and wings, then I'd get hate mail, like, hey, you haven't been there for a couple of months. So we always won. It was always at home. I never did it away unless we won a grand final, which we did a couple of times. And, that was pretty cool. Pretty stupid, but pretty cool.
Yeah, it's always good to have something. Like, I remember back in the days when I first started out my career with my dad, I began working on the warehouse floor, sweeping floors, dealing with unreasonable people, when you build that whole customer relationship. And, but I guess where this statement's leading to is...
But you're a very good sweeper. Just remember that.
Thank you.
You're very good at sweeping.
Well, look, we always say if you want to be the CEO of a company, you also got to know what's happening at the bottom of the chain.
Nearly all of the good ones anyway start at the bottom, work all the way up.
Yeah, 100%.
Now look at you got like cleaners and shit.
Yeah. Well, they actually come in once a week. I don't actually think they came in for a month once, and I'm thinking, well, you're coming in. But anyways.
Well, it's always clean in here though.
Yeah, well, we try.
Well, it wasn't for your sweeping and vacuuming.
Definitely. But I guess, did you think AFL helped you transition into the real estate industry?
Not really. Probably, yes and no. I mean, you've always got, like in Aussie rules and professional sport, it is quite demanding. It's very tough, very disciplined. you're always a creature of doing things, the extras. You've got to go the extra mile. You've got to be able to do certain things well. I think, and Aussie rules at that level, and also real estate are quite up and down. You know, you're selling, selling, and then you can't sell for 3 months. You're like, what's going on? It is, I suppose, emotionally, it's quite similar because you do get the highs of the sales. They take a long time to build up. The wins take years to be a good team, and take years to keep winning, and winning is not guaranteed. It's the same as anything because it's such a good habit. So I think as I started, like in real estate and auctioneering, you just got to be very good at those particular jobs. But getting listings is your network. You've still got to convince them to sell your house. So
Yeah.
I think it's more Aussie rules taught me how to deal with very different types, but they're all male really. But you know, when I go out and I have a lot of female clients or whatever, that's not that easy because they're not always convinced. And it generally is 90% of the time, if there's a male and female in a house, you never go there, just talk to the male. If you don't get the female on side, she makes a decision. You can have 3 real estate agents go in there and she's the one who picks it. So it's a little bit different. They're never all the same, but you certainly got to be well structured. You've always got to have, you know, diaries and make sure you're on time and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's, in some ways they're very different, but in other ways the same rules of success. You know, it's a numbers game. You've got to keep you know, battering up, just keep coming, buttering up. Anyway, that's pretty much the way I see it.
Yeah, I always think it's about consistency. Almost get up at the same time every morning, go to gym most days, but applying the same work ethic day in, day out. It's always about making the same amount of phone calls or sending out the same amount of emails. But I think if you keep your word, and given in this industry your name is everything, people start to see that. And I think that's also how, it's not that you can guarantee work, but people will come back because of who you are.
Yeah, they do. And they also make it hard for you. Like you can walk into somewhere and some days you got no chance. They're like, oh, they're not happy with you for something you said 10 years ago. Or on the reverse, you get probably deals you don't deserve in some ways. And so you get the good and the bad. But, you know, I've dealt with some pretty average people, like particularly owners, sellers. Oh, my God. You know, they're just interesting people and greedy and, you know, you try and work with them the best you can. But, you know, the 4 or 5 listings I've had to let go of, been very happy because the owners are just absolute pains in the ass.
Yeah.
Pain in the ass. Yeah, someone else can have them. And nearly all of them still have their properties are still for sale.
Yeah.
Months after I've gotten rid of it, and I had them all for sale. And sold them all, and then for whatever reason, a deal might have fallen over, and they say, I'm going somewhere else. And I'm like, good luck with that. And they're still waiting.
Yeah. But now I guess we're in very similar industries, real estate, valuations. We both can agree that it's a very colourful industry.
Yes.
And I think I can also recall recently you sold a property I valued.
Yeah,
and
that was
for above my valuation too. How good was that?
It was just, I mean, it was quite interesting. That particular one was obviously it was liquidation. So you did the valuation for the company. We both have mates in that company, but it doesn't mean anything. You did the valuation. It came in about 1,670. Anyway, I did the open homes auction. I got to do the auction of getting people in, and they were starting at like 1,4. I said to the liquidator, I said, listen, I don't think this is going to get 1,6. So anyway, eventually, you know, you got 167. I reckon it's about 1,6. The buyers are saying 1,6. Anyway, so the reserve was 1,6. We did the auction, and I think I had 14 registered bidders. So it was well bidded. But of course, generally out of 14, there's 3 or 4 going hard. And anyway, they're going hard. And I said, look, if it gets on the market, I'll tell you. So, and one of the actual bidders was the owner of the house. Now, you can do that. It's very unusual, but sometimes they can buy back their own house.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, she was there bidding, and she was really pushing the price up. And she was happy to pay for it, which is great. But in the end, it worked well for her because if you think about it, she gets what's left, and liquidators get their bit. We get our normal commissions and everything else that goes with it because we've got to pay for everything up front. It's a very unusual situation because you got building a pest and pool and all this kind of other stuff. I'll have to pay for and get it back later. So there's still no guarantees. Anyway, it goes on the market, and there was a lady there, a Chinese lady. She was visiting her friend next door, comes over to watch the auction. I think it was about 1,650. So we're getting close to what you expect. It's over reserve, so it's going to sell. And she said, which you can. She goes, can I be a registered bidder? So she's just there watching. So we go over do the paperwork, stop the auction. We restart the auction. Now she ends up buying it for 1,703, so 1,703,000. And it was hilarious to think that she was just there, and her husband said in the morning, "Now listen, don't go and buy any houses, all right?" So she ends up buying it. Anyway, I said afterwards, I said, "What's going on? You just here visiting your friend next door? You come over?" She goes, "Oh no, when I saw it was 1.6 in Carindale, it's cheap." So in the end, the liquidators wrapped, the owners wrapped, and your valuation was nearly spot on.
Yeah.
But you just never know. Like you could do 10 of them for SV partners who we did it for, and you might get it right 2-3 times. You just never know.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, later on in our conversation, I'm going to give you a bit of a valuation myth. But look, the one question I want to ask everyone on this Valuers Corner is, okay, how do you perceive value?
Well, value, it's good these days. I mean, it's pretty easy. Most buyers can get hold of a lot of data. So if you got your house that's sitting in Carindale, you can see all the sales for the last 6 months. You can get that. We get that as agents. You get that. And generally, if you're doing the valuation or a bank, the banks are quite conservative. But I also know that banks can be too conservative, so much so that valuers can say, you can say, "I don't want that valuer." And I know another mate who is a valuer, who's an independent valuer for the banks, and he's done some jobs, and the owner has said, "I don't want that guy to value my property. He's too cheap." And valuations are important because even now, as the market kind of comes off a bit, valuations are everything because the bank will give you the money and the valuation's got to stack up. And so with valuations, there's also what the buyers are telling you. Now, in any market, price fixes all. So if 3 buyers are saying that Carindale property, which they did, it's 1.5, 155. And we've got some few offers, 157. I think we got one at 1.6. So they were thereabouts. That's what they would have paid. And if I got them into a bit of an auction off, as a private treaty, then they might have got to that. You just never know.
They could all bidding war.
So you get your valuation that's done on the data and all your professional work. Then you get mine that's done on all the sales. And then you get the buyers.
Yeah.
The buyers are arguably the most important part, no matter the evaluation. It doesn't matter what you think it's worth or I think it's worth. It's what they're prepared to pay. If they wanted to pay $2 million for that and the valuation was 167, that's fine. That's just the way it is. Yeah. There was a guy who just bought a house in the heat. I think he paid 2.7 in Hendra.
Oh, wow.
I think he just resold it for 600 grand less. So in that hot market, he paid that, but the valuations would stack up. But then he wanted to sell it late. He lost 600 grand. Oh. And that's what the power of the buyer is. So it didn't matter what I made, didn't matter what you think it's worth. Within 12 months, it's gone down 600 grand. It hasn't. But the buyer, if he wasn't that desperate to sell, he could have kept it and made some money. But he didn't. Yeah,
no, that's fair enough. Well, look, I'll get to one thing I wanted to start is with valuation myths, right? Mm-hmm. Last one, we asked whether, yes or no, whether an accountant should value your business. We obviously answered no because of independence. But today, it's going to be, do you think property valuers undervalue property?
Generally, depends. Not really. They're usually pretty spot on. I don't mind a low valuation because it helps me sell it. Yeah. It's actually the most difficult part is generally getting the seller to realise what their property's worth. Yeah. And if you say, listen, it's $500,000 less than you're thinking. Now, in the end, you get a listing. You don't tell them until you get the listing because you can't talk price until you get a listing anyway because it's irrelevant. You say, you could get $3 million for that, but it's worth $2 million. Yeah. And they're thinking 3, and then eventually you get the listing and you say, listen, that's not going to happen. Here's the valuation, and you got to condition them down to where you can get, in between the seller and the buyer, you can get them at a price where everyone wins. And I think that's the other part of valuations where there's only so much you can do. We can't. It's good to have them. It's a good guide. Price guide's good. I got one guy. His house is worth 1.1.
Yeah,
but he'll take under $1 million. But it's only because he wants to sell. Now, do you think we can get an offer under $1 million? Now, it's very hard to tell buyers, look, just offer this and you're in with the show. You can only do so much. Even though when they ask, I said, look, it is worth 1.1 because it is.
Yeah.
But there's always a but. 3 people don't want to pay 1.1 million and they want to pay $1 million. He would take $1 million, no worries. But it would take high nines.
High nines.
It'll get sold, but, there's this battle between, and they're good owners that aren't greedy. So the valuations, there's a bit of equity at least. Everyone's winning. He sells it. He's bored around the corner. He doesn't care. They buy it. They get 150 grand off. Hey, that's value. The valuations will still come in at 1-1.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, my answer is whenever I value for banks or first mortgage, we always go 15% less. If you look at the current market, current economic environment of COVID and everything that's going on with interest rates and banks, valuations are usually valid for around 3 months. So if we put actual market value on it, I think we'd be in trouble. Because there's a slight fall. I don't think it's going to fall as much as everybody says, but
they always get it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
I think once the interest rates stop going up, there'll be a natural coming back. It'll start to go back up, and it will be good timing because generally in Queensland, for example, in Brisbane, March is the highest part of the year. But there's also other factors in play. But you're right. I mean, there's still 800 people a week moving here. Like that's not going. That's why the rent market's impossible to get a rental. That will eventually flow back onto the buyer's market. It might not be the ridiculous 5 to 14 day sale, but it'd still be 28 days. But it'll be well priced. Yeah. But it is always tricky. I mean, accountants are numbers people. Yeah. So numbers doesn't matter if you're independent. Like they just go, this is what the numbers are: a business or a house or what you can earn or what you earn versus what you can bloody loan.
Yeah.
So they're always conservative.
Yeah.
I don't ever see an aggressive accountant. All the aggressive accountants are all in jail because they all get done for fraud. So
that's fair enough.
You wouldn't trust them.
No, that's
if they're aggressive.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, you don't meet too many colourful accountants. It's always about numbers and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, they're boring bastards. You'd never marry one. I mean, you get divorced from one, you'll be paying through the teeth for the rest of your life. or a lawyer.
Trust me, we valued a few accounting firms, and it gets pretty interesting, harding numbers and all that sort of stuff. But
they're good at it.
Yeah, lots of trails, but at the same time, I know some very good ones too. So it's it's a very
we've got one in at the moment. Like it's a tax return from a few years ago, so it's a good sized tax return, but. Our accountant is good and done everything right, and the ATO is like, oh, we're going to review it. Like, what is the point? It's not like they're pros at what they're doing. They're not going to rip the ATO off because then the client would suffer. But anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But another thing I want to ask you is back to AFL. What would you say is your best memory ever for the Lions?
Well, I got a few. Obviously, I kicked 5 goals too in the 2003 grand final. We won. Didn't get Norm Smith or anything, but I was our best player, one of our best players. And then the game I played in 2004 in the wet, I kicked 5 goals, I had 35 touches, I had about 12, 15 tackles. Like, it's the best game I ever played. And pissing that, if you actually look on the highlight reel on YouTube, you'll see 2 of those goals are in the late in the third quarter from the boundary. They're great goals, but I actually kicked 5 that day. And it wasn't just that I played well, got lots of touches. It was all the tackles I made. Like that day, Geelong were a little bit off. They had a few guys sick, but it doesn't matter. You can only do what you can do. And just played the game of games. And I think most people that play professional sport, whether it's golf or particularly a field sport, there's always something in a game you're like, oh, I could have done that. There's always, it's never perfect. But that was... I can't even think of after that game. I can't even think of one thing that just didn't go my way or wasn't good. So it was one of those games. And Dermot Brereton, at the time, he was working at Channel 9. It was the first time ever he gave a 10 out of 10. It was the first time ever Lee Matthews gave 5 out of 5 because that's the best and fairest. That goes 1, 1.5, 2, all the way up to 5, and I got 5. Yep. So you play well. Yep. So they're the 2 most special, crazy memories because there's really nothing better.
And it must be something else with the crowd roaring and cheering. Was this on your home ground?
Yeah, that was at the Gabba. And it was a wet day. We still had 22,000 people in there, which is quite good considering it was warm, but it was middle of winter and cold and for Brisbane, and it was raining. Yeah. But we had the bye the next week, I remember, and I saw some of the Geelong players out. We went to the regatta, caught up with them. And they were like, man, I've never seen a game like that. That was some game. I was like, yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Even I have to admit it was good.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I guess, what is the one thing people misunderstand about you most?
Well, I mean, I don't really suffer fools, but I think most people think that because you got an opinion that you're opinionated.
Yep.
And then they talk to you and they go, oh, geez, like someone to say, oh, let's just say a controversial topic. I might say, oh, gender or something shit that they've got going on today. And I say, oh, yeah, it's pretty easy from my point of view. This is the way I see it. You're born male, female. No, there's a bit of grey. You shouldn't have to choose your sex because it's pretty certain. And if you want to get it done later, well, you got to be careful because you got to go through the whole rigmarole. There's a lot of things to consider. But when you've got toilets which are male, female, and you've got no idea which one you are, you just go on that one, or there's another one like fair income. So I'm pretty like black and white. But I'll tell you, but I'll accept if you say, well, I today identify as a giraffe. I'm like, well, that's pretty ridiculous. But, you can be a female tomorrow if you like, but give us a spell. So, and it's not like I won't take your opinions on, but, I think that's probably the thing I get the most. Plus, people think that I am more vocal if I was in a group and I would get coaches offside. Like, I was a very good coach and I couldn't get a coaching job in the AFL. And I have no doubt it's because they thought that. They thought that, you're not a team player. And it's a complete crap. Yeah. It is such crap. It's more crap than you could poke a stick at. So I just generally, it's like a conspiracy theory. So I generally just sort of say, well, that's not true. But I think in the end, you read the tea leaves and you go, oh, well, I'll go do something else. I'll go into real estate, or you go on your own business. Go your own way.
No, that's great. I do like the whole model with your real estate and Blue Moon. It's wonderful.
It's a bit crazy.
Yeah.
I don't even put my head on the signs anymore because people don't really recognise it because I don't have blonde hair. So I just put the handstand. There's a logo of the handstand. I just put the handstand there.
Yeah.
People come in.
Well, on that topic of blonde hair, why did you go blonde? Was it just
stand out?
Stand out?
Stand out every day of the week. So when I was younger, I think the first game I played in 95, I had a mohawk. And then when I was in juniors, so I would play. So you look at juniors and I would wear a white T-shirt underneath my jumper. Stand out.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I used to have fluoro pink, like bike pants underneath. Stand out.
Yeah.
And then one day in the preseason, I was watching one of our games, and I saw Adam Huskis, who was one of my teammates. He had blonde hair. And everywhere he went in the screen, I couldn't help but look at him. I'm like, that's it, blonde hair.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't always get it right. I could easily be a lot blonder, a lot quicker. I ended up getting like a darkened goatee, which was brilliant. But, yeah, that was as good an idea. I think in 99, not only was I All-Australian, I was our highest vote getter in the Brownlow. So 2 years later, I ended up winning the Brownlow. I was a good player, but you still got to stand out and you still got to be able to not just play well, but the umpires have got to, because it's only 3, 2, 1. There's only 6 votes and there's a lot of guys on the field. So you can be the 4th best player and get nothing. And you can dominate the game, kick 10, kick 15 goals and still only get 3 votes. So it's a very unique system. Yeah. In the end, that was why.
Yeah. No, it's always about backing yourself. Even like when we produce our vels, if we say we can do it in 7 days at a good fee with the best service, we back ourselves on that. But now that we're approaching the end of the Valuers Corner in the show, I want to ask you a question around would you rather? Would you rather be underpaid in the top team or overpaid in the bottom team?
No, underpaid in the top team. I was underpaid and I was in the best team. I took a pay cut. So did a lot of my teammates. In 2004, we nearly won the flag. Because in the end, that 20 grand or that 60 grand, whatever it is, sometimes it's more. But when you look at your wall and you've got 3 premierships, a Brownlow medal, all the money in the world, they can never take that from you. To be in a crap team, and I played against some very good players who played in crap teams their whole career, and they never won a flag. They're forgotten. They're just gone from the system. They were good players, like bloody good players.
Yeah. And I guess the feeling of entering the Hall of Fame, that must have been like very satisfying.
Well, I was actually eligible in 2015 and they didn't put me in. And Brad Johnson, who was one of my teammates at the Bulldogs, he got in. Anyway, the press at the time, some of the big writers in Melbourne said, particularly The Age and the Herald Sun, they said, look, all due respect, Aker's one of the best players of all time. His record was better than the 5 that got in. He said, you might not like what he said occasionally, but you cannot be serious. Anyway, the next year I get in, 2016. And I'm actually in 4 Hall of Fame. So I'm in the AFL Hall of Fame. I'm in the Brisbane Lions Hall of Fame. I'm in the AFL Queensland Hall of Fame and the Queensland Sporting Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And that was all done by the time I was 39, so that's about 6 years ago. And I'm like, man, I've just peaked. There's nothing better. I mean, it's not like you can go and be in the real estate Hall of Fame. Real estate just become the best and make the most money and do the best job, but that's about it. You can't go anywhere from there.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good. But to be recognised, it's very funny because you get recognised for everything you did in the past. And there's a limit. And then the only thing better than being in the AFL Hall of Fame is becoming a legend of the AFL Hall of Fame. And you get a statue. And
oh, wow.
It's really, really hard. And only one of them gets inducted a year. So, it's going to be, if you ever got that far, and look, there's possibility anyone that goes in there can get it, but yeah, it's pretty special.
No, that's awesome. But yeah, what a privilege for me to interview you, I guess, on Valuers Corner. But this brings us to a close, and I just want to thank you on behalf of Asset Valuations Group and myself for coming on and having a yarn, I guess, and having a beer.
Yes.
Very, very, I've tried my best to be as Australian as I can with everything because I am South African born, as you know.
We've all got problems. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's so many South Africans here, but there's so many South Africans I see come and see Aussie rules footy and go, man, this is the craziest sport I've ever seen.
And I've heard they're the fittest people in the world.
They're very fit. It's certainly the hardest field sport in the world because it's just got everything. You really can't be bad at anything, but
yeah,
there's fitter people like those triathletes and ultramarathoners. They're idiots. But if you got a ball sport, there'd be nothing harder. Like gridiron's hard, but it's got no endurance.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Soccer's hard, but you can't use your hands unless you're the goalie. So, rugby union's hard, but you don't have that extra level where you got to run and do all these other things.
Yep.
So, it's just pretty crazy. But it is good to be here. I've been working with you guys for a while. I've known you guys for a long time. So, I look forward to the next one. Hopefully we get a bit more work through the channels we do. But it'll be interesting the next valuation. See if I can't beat it again.
Who knows? You might be selling businesses next, right? Doing all the business hours we've been doing.
You can do anything.
Yeah.
Do anything.
Anything you put your mind to. But
That's right.
But everyone, thanks for watching today. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And if there's anyone you'd like to see or any questions you did want to ask Aka, send me a DM. Thank you.